Have you ever looked at your phone, begging for a message that never comes? Have you sat there replaying conversations, wondering where it all went wrong, why she pulled away, why she stopped caring? You're not alone, but you're lost in a war you don't even realize you're fighting. A silent war, not against her, but against yourself. Modern relationships have destroyed many men. We've been told to feel more, chase more, beg more, and when she leaves, when she ghosts you, you're expected to stay available, just in case she wants to come back. You've been taught to break yourself for someone who wouldn't even bend for you. But today, that ends, because this isn't just about relationships, it's about your life, your identity, your future. We're talking about how to win the silent battle. And if you truly want to reclaim your power, not just from women, but from every place you gave it away, keep listening. Comment, "I choose power," if you're ready to watch this video till the end. Number 1. No contact triggers uncertainty. No contact, when truly implemented, not half-heartedly or performatively, but with full commitment, doesn't just cause confusion in her mind. It forces a collision between her illusions and the reality she thought she controlled. Most men don't understand the weight of their withdrawal. They think ignoring a message or skipping a call is the strategy. But it goes deeper. It's about the total shift in energy, about completely redirecting your focus, your time, and your thoughts away from her and toward yourself. When you cut contact, it's not just about absence, it's about presence elsewhere. It's about no longer giving her the emotional rent-free space in your mind. The moment she senses you're not orbiting her world anymore, a panic sets in. Not always visible, not always immediate, but psychological. This isn't about her love, it's about her control. Because most women in modern relationships are not used to losing grip on a man once they've emotionally entangled him. They expect compliance. They rely on your dependency. They know the average man will fold with a single breadcrumb, a vague "I miss you" text, or a flirty story view. And when you don't bite, when you don't respond, when you don't reappear, when you don't even flinch, she starts to unravel inside. She begins to question the version of herself she's built through the validation you used to provide. You were her mirror, and now it's gone. But understand, this isn't your revenge, and it's not your responsibility to heal her ego. Your silence isn't a message for her, it's a message to yourself. It says you're done being manipulated. It says you're not a pawn in someone else's narrative. It says you're no longer the man who tolerates disrespect under the disguise of love. The key here is full emotional detachment. Not silence while secretly waiting for her to reach out. Not pretending you're busy while checking her profile every hour. Not claiming you've moved on while designing your life around her potential return. That's not no contact. That's self-deception. Real no contact is radical. It's you saying, "I don't need closure. I don't need an apology. I don't need anything from someone who already showed me what they think of me." And that's when the shift happens. That's when you stop reacting to her behavior and start creating your own future. She will test it. She will find subtle ways to reclaim her place in your emotional space. She might like an old post, or message a mutual friend, or send a "hey" that means nothing and everything. But your job is to see through it, to not romanticize her confusion, to understand that you are not a rescue mission. You are not her validation source. You are not her fallback plan. The longer you stay firm in no contact, the more the uncertainty grows, not just in her mind, but in yours. You start to realize how little you actually needed her, how much energy you poured into keeping something alive that was never nurturing you. That's the moment clarity begins. That's when your habits shift. You stop checking your phone. You stop fantasizing about her return. You stop craving her validation. You start building. You go back to the gym, not for her, but for your discipline. You create goals, not to prove your worth to her, but to discover it for yourself. You reconnect with purpose, not because she walked away, but because you were drifting long before she left. This uncertainty isn't just hers, it's yours too. But it's the fertile ground where identity is reborn. Most men never reach this stage. They break no contact because they confuse anxiety with love. They fear being forgotten, so they reach out. And the moment they do, the power they were reclaiming disappears. Don't be that man. Embrace the uncertainty. Let it expose every weak spot in your character. Let it humble you, break you, challenge you. Because what emerges on the other side is not the man she used to manipulate. It's the man she can never touch again. No contact isn't a pause, it's a portal. Step through it. And that's the power you unlock when you choose yourself over uncertainty. But if you're ready to go deeper, to rebuild not just your emotional strength, but your entire approach to relationships, purpose, and self-mastery, then the Stoic Relationship Blueprint is your next step. It's not just an ebook, it's your lifelong guide, designed for the man who refuses to be broken by love again. Inside, you'll find the exact framework to master detachment, set unshakable standards, and rebuild a life that commands respect without ever needing to chase it. And the best part? It's yours forever. You'll always have access to this wisdom whenever the doubt creeps in, whenever the silence feels too loud, whenever you need to remember who you are and what you stand. For it's linked in the comments. Number 2, predictability kills attraction. If you're always available, always responding, always reacting, you become invisible. Most men think availability equals love, that consistency in communication guarantees respect or desire. But that belief is the trap. You see, in the beginning of most modern relationships, women don't just fall for the man. They fall for the unpredictability, the challenge, the tension of not knowing if they have full access to you. It's that uncertainty that creates emotional engagement. And what do most men do once they sense she's interested? They over-deliver. They answer every message within seconds. They cancel plans to be available. They shape their lives around her schedule, her moods, her energy. They become predictable. And predictability over time is the fastest way to kill desire. Because when a woman knows exactly how you'll respond, when she can predict your next move, she stops wondering. And when she stops wondering, she stops caring. The irony? The more effort you give, the faster you lose value. That's not just opinion, it's biology. Attraction is rooted in uncertainty. Mystery fuels desire. Predictability suffocates it. Most men become so emotionally invested in being the good guy that they forget who they were before they met her. The man who had plans, passions, purpose. That man gets replaced by a version of himself that exists solely to keep her interested. And that shift, that loss of self, is the beginning of the end. She sees it. She feels it. She resents it. Because even if she says she wants consistency, what she really means is consistency in your value, not your availability. Predictability says you're always here. Predictability says you have no other options. Predictability says you need her more than she needs you. And that's when she starts pulling back. First, it's slower replies. Then it's less interest in seeing you. Then it's random mood swings and unexplained coldness. You think you did something wrong, but you didn't. You just became boring. And boring never wins. That's why no contact, when done right, reignites the very thing that attracted her in the first place. Your independence. Your absence reminds her of your options. Your silence reminds her of your strength. Your indifference reminds her that your world existed before her, and it'll thrive after her. But again, this is not about her. This is about the man you become when you stop needing to be needed. The man who doesn't reply just because someone demands it. The man who isn't afraid to be alone on a Friday night because his solitude is more sacred than shallow companionship. The man who leads his life and lets others keep up or fall behind. You don't need to be mysterious. You need to be so focused, so purpose-driven, so disciplined that your life naturally makes you unavailable. That's how you kill predictability. Not with games, but with greatness. And the moment you stop trying to hold on to her attention, the moment you stop centering your self-worth on whether she replies or validates or initiates, that's the moment attraction returns. Not just from her, but from the world. Because people are drawn to men who don't need to be chased. They're magnetized by men who are already moving. So stop trying to be the perfect boyfriend. Start being the man who's too focused to be predictable. Because that's the man who keeps them guessing. And guess what? The one who keeps them guessing is the one they never forget. Number 3, break the feedback loop. Breaking the feedback loop means breaking the chain you've been dragging behind you for far too long, and most men don't even realize they're in one. They just think they're being loyal, being patient, being understanding, when in truth, they're trapped in a cycle of emotional self-destruction, where every ignored message followed by another attempt, every emotional withdrawal met with more affection, every breadcrumb responded to with a banquet of validation only serves to teach her one lesson: that you can be disrespected without consequence, that your presence is guaranteed, that your value is conditional on her moods. And when you live in that loop, you're not just bleeding power, you're teaching her to never take you seriously again. This is the loop where your pride dies, where your dignity evaporates one unanswered text at a time, where she knows exactly how far she can push before you crawl back. And this isn't about being cruel. This is about reality, because human beings, regardless of gender, respond to patterns. And if the pattern you offer is, the more she pulls away, the more I try, you're rewarding distance, you're validating disrespect, you're becoming the emotional punching bag who believes suffering equals love. And until you snap that pattern, until you break the loop completely and choose peace over obsession, self-respect over response, growth over groveling, nothing changes. In fact, it only gets worse, because she'll start to resent the very validation you offer. She'll test more, pull harder, disappear longer, because she knows you'll still be there. And the more she realizes that, the more her attraction fades, not because she's evil, but because human nature doesn't admire what it doesn't fear losing. And when your reactions are guaranteed, your value plummets. And the truth is, you've likely already felt this happening. You can sense her becoming colder, shorter, more dismissive, and yet you still try, still text, still hope, because you're stuck in the loop that says, maybe this time, and that belief is the leash around your neck. And if you want to escape it, you have to rewire everything. Your need for closure, your compulsion to explain yourself, your addiction to hope. You need to see that no response is a response, that the more you react to her silence, the more silent she becomes, because the loop isn't accidental. It's training, and she's trained you to keep proving yourself while she does less and less. And breaking the loop doesn't mean hating her or even ignoring her. It means redefining who you are when nobody is watching, when nobody is texting back. It means recognizing that your self-worth cannot survive in an environment where it's only validated externally. It means standing in the discomfort of not knowing and choosing not to chase certainty at the cost of your pride. And that's where true transformation begins. Not when she comes back, not when she apologizes, not when she validates you, but when you stop needing any of it, when you reclaim your peace through indifference, not in a performative way, but in a grounded, unshakable clarity that says, I don't chase people who confuse me. And that clarity isn't built overnight. It's built through discipline, through moments of silence where you feel the pull to reach out and don't, where you feel the urge to check her feed and scroll past it, where you feel the pain and sit with it instead of numbing it with attention-seeking, And every one of those moments is a brick in the foundation of your new self, the one who doesn't operate in emotional loops anymore, who doesn't measure love by the frequency of texts, who doesn't break himself to maintain someone else's comfort. And once that version of you is born, something remarkable happens. You stop attracting chaos because you no longer tolerate it. You stop needing validation because you've built internal proof, and more importantly, you stop fearing loss because you've realized the only thing worse than losing her is losing yourself in the process of keeping her. So write this down. Burn it into your brain. The loop doesn't break when she changes. It breaks when you do. Number 4. Comfort is the enemy. Comfort is the enemy because it lies to you. It tells you that staying in a relationship where you're tolerated is better than walking into the unknown, that clinging to her routine rejections, passive-aggressive moods, and unpredictable affection is somehow safer than facing the silence of being truly alone. And that illusion has destroyed more men than heartbreak ever could, because most men aren't trapped by love. They're trapped by comfort masquerading as connection, by predictability dressed up as peace. And the truth is brutal. Many of you are not with her because she inspires you, respects you, or supports your mission. You're with her because you're afraid of what your life looks like without her. Because the pain of rebuilding seems harder than the pain of staying broken. And that fear convinces you to normalize dysfunction, to accept sex as affection, disrespect as independence, distance as strength. And every time she pulls away and you do nothing, every time she talks down to you and you rationalize it, every time she withholds love and you chase harder, you're not choosing her. You're choosing comfort, the known, the familiar, even when it's killing you slowly, because it feels less terrifying than starting over. And comfort is clever like that. It gives you just enough dopamine to stay addicted, just enough false hope to keep you loyal, and it uses your own fear against you, because deep down, you know the truth. If you really left, if you really disappeared, if you really chose yourself, you'd have to rebuild. You'd have to face the mirror and ask, who am I without this? And most men aren't ready for that answer, so they stay, not because it's love, but because it's easier to stay asleep than to wake up and face the work of healing, of becoming someone who doesn't settle for average, for tension, for emotional ambiguity. And until you see comfort as the enemy, you'll keep mistaking your suffering for stability. You'll keep justifying her disrespect. You'll keep trading your peace for her attention. And you'll keep thinking, maybe it's me. When the truth is, it's always been the fact that you're choosing safety over standards. And not every woman who wants you respects you. Not every relationship that survives is worth saving. And not every connection that feels strong is actually healthy. And when you get honest with yourself, brutally honest, you'll see that the biggest lie comfort told you was that being alone is worse than being unloved. But let me ask you, what if the version of you you're meant to become is on the other side of cutting ties, of moving on, of walking away and not looking back, not to prove a point, not to play games, but to finally see what your life looks like when you're not orbiting around her moods, her texts, her approval, her validation, because the man who lives in comfort is always reacting. He's reactive to her silence, to her affection, to her inconsistencies. And that makes him predictable, weak, needy, and eventually disposable. And the only way to reverse that is to become the man who initiates change, who creates distance not out of bitterness but out of clarity, who values his time too much to waste it on people who are still deciding. And that man isn't born from convenience. He's forged through discomfort, through lonely nights, through gym sessions where the pain speaks louder than the doubt, through books, solitude, mission, and the relentless rebuilding of a life that isn't built around being someone's option, but being your own priority. And once you internalize that, once you stop fearing discomfort and start using it as fuel, you become dangerous. Not because you seek revenge, but because you no longer seek approval, and the women who once treated you like a backup now see a man who doesn't flinch, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. He disappears, evolves, and replaces comfort with conviction. And every area of your life shifts because of it. Your money grows because you're not distracted. Your confidence grows because you're not overcompensating. Your boundaries strengthen because you're no longer dependent. And eventually you realize that the version of you who once settled for comfort is unrecognizable, and you never go back, not because she changed, but because you finally did. Number 5. The mind hates gaps in patterns. The human brain is addicted to patterns. It craves rhythm, predictability, and reinforcement because that's how it makes sense of reality. And in relationships, these patterns become emotional cycles that dictate how two people engage, respond, and influence one another. Which means the second you disrupt those patterns, the mind of the person who depended on your reactionary behavior begins to spiral, not out of love, not out of regret, but out of confusion, tension, and ego collapse, because she didn't just get used to your presence, she relied on your responses to keep herself emotionally fed. And when you vanish from that routine, when you stop texting good morning, when you don't chase after being ignored, when you don't explain your silence, the loop is broken, and her mind, trained on the dopamine hits your attention used to bring, now finds itself in withdrawal, searching for the next cue, the next reward. And when that cue doesn't come, when the reward vanishes, she begins to question her own standing, not because she misses you, but because the pattern she thought she owned has gone cold. And that's what most men don't realize. They're not just breaking contact, they're disrupting a psychological addiction, one that she took for granted, one that made her feel in control. And this disruption plants seeds of chaos in her perception. She starts refreshing your profile, wondering if she missed a post, a hint, a sign, something to reinsert herself into the cycle. And when nothing comes, that chaos deepens, because the mind hates unanswered questions even more than it hates rejection. And the man who was once predictable now becomes a question mark, and question marks demand answers, which is why she starts reappearing, not always directly, sometimes subtly, a like here, a message to a mutual friend, a random, "Hey stranger," not because she wants you back, but because her pattern broke, and the loop has to close. And if you respond, if you re-enter the cycle she built, if you re-engage just to ease the tension, you're not restoring love. You're re-establishing control, handing her the script again, letting her direct the play, and worse, you're showing her that your detachment was never real, just a performance waiting for applause. But if you stay quiet, if you hold the line, if you remain unavailable not to hurt her, but because you've chosen growth over games, you allow that broken pattern to do its real job, to create space for identity rebuilding. And this is where the shift happens, not in her, but in you. Because the longer the pattern stays broken, the more space you have to create a new rhythm, one where your time is invested into your body, your business, your brothers, your books, where you reclaim the power of attention and direct it inward, building a routine that no longer requires her reaction to feel alive. And you'll notice this internally. The itch to check her profile fades, the urge to decode her silence weakens, the compulsion to respond to her breadcrumbs dies, not because you've numbed yourself, but because your new rhythm is finally stronger than the old one. And this isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding that most modern relationships are not love stories. They're loops, power loops, attention loops, validation loops. And once you're aware of this, you become intentional, not reactive. You stop offering unlimited access to someone who treats your heart like a vending machine, and your detachment becomes rooted in reality, not resentment, because the pattern was always one-sided. She distanced, you chased; she withdrew, you panicked; She disrespected, you rationalized, and the longer you participated, the less she valued your presence, because it wasn't earned, it was assumed. And when you remove yourself from that dynamic, when you don't correct her assumptions, when you let her wonder, her story starts to collapse, because the mind hates missing pieces, and when you don't provide them, she's forced to fill the blanks. And the more she guesses, the more tension builds. Not because you played a game, but because you stopped playing hers, and that silence becomes your shield, your weapon, your clarity. Not to hurt her, but to heal yourself, because the man who breaks the loop doesn't just break her narrative, he builds his own. Number 6, starve her ego, starve the control. There's a hard truth most men avoid because it's too painful to admit. She doesn't need to love you to keep you around. She just needs to know you'll keep showing up. And every time you respond after being ignored, every time you validate her after being disrespected, every time you reappear after she disappears, you're not just proving you care, you're proving you're still available for her ego. And once a woman learns she can feed her self-esteem at your expense, she will do it without remorse. Because in the modern world, many women aren't seeking connection. They're seeking control, and they gain that control by keeping you emotionally engaged, even when they've stopped being emotionally available, and the way they do that is deceptively simple. They drop just enough attention to keep you hoping, just enough breadcrumbs to keep you following, just enough affection to keep you chasing. And as long as you respond, as long as you participate, as long as you react, they know they still have power, not because they love you, but because they know you love them, and that imbalance is exactly what they exploit, sometimes consciously, sometimes instinctively, but always to maintain leverage. And this is where most men destroy themselves. They mistake ego-fueled interactions for romantic potential. They interpret a random thinking about you text as genuine reconnection, when in reality, it's often just a test to see if you're still emotionally available, still on the hook, still orbiting. And if you reply with excitement, if you show you're still waiting, you reinforce the very dynamic that made her pull away in the first place. Because women don't admire men they can emotionally manipulate. They admire men who create distance when disrespected, who disappear when taken for granted, who elevate their standards instead of lowering them to stay relevant. And starving her ego isn't about ghosting her, blocking her, or going cold. It's about not needing to be seen by her. It's about removing her from the pedestal, killing the part of you that believes her attention equals your worth. And this is where your life starts to change, because the man who no longer needs to be validated stops playing the game entirely. He no longer posts to be seen, no longer waits for story views, no longer responds to breadcrumbs, not because he's bitter, but because he's better. And when she realizes that, when she sees you're not reacting, not chasing, not proving, not seeking, she feels the loss, not of the relationship, but of the control. And that's when she starts to panic, when she sends more obvious signals, when she starts watching again, asking mutual friends, testing the waters, not because she misses you, but because she can't handle the vacuum of attention where your loyalty used to be. But by then, if you've done the work, you're no longer the same man. Your identity is no longer built around how she sees you. Your confidence is no longer contingent on whether she texts you back. And more importantly, your time is now a currency you don't spend on people who drained it for free. And this transformation doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious, aware of the difference between love and leverage, between affection and addiction, between closure and control. And that awareness is how you reclaim your power. Because the man who starves her ego is not the villain. He's the architect of his freedom, the builder of boundaries, the protector of peace. And if you want to become that man, you have to get brutally honest with yourself. Are you responding out of hope or out of habit? Are you engaging because she matters, or because you can't stand being ignored? Are you still attached because she's special, or because you've convinced yourself that she's the only one who will ever choose you? Because the truth is, the longer you feed her ego, the more you starve your own potential, and the only way to break that cycle is to stop trying to win her back and start trying to win yourself back, to reinvest all that energy into becoming someone who doesn't just attract attention, but commands respect. Not through force, but through focus. Not through pain, but through purpose. And once you've done that, once you've pulled all your power back from the hands that never appreciated it, you won't care if she ever reaches out again, not because you hate her, but because you finally love yourself enough to never beg for crumbs again. Number 7. Let go to gain control. Letting go to gain control sounds backwards at first, especially in a world that conditions men to believe that holding on is loyalty, that fighting for love is noble, that persistence is strength. But what no one tells you is that the strongest move you'll ever make isn't to hold tighter. It's to release entirely. And the reason most men stay stuck in emotional loops isn't because they're weak or hopeless. It's because they've bought into the lie that love requires suffering, that if they just do more, wait longer, try harder, she'll come around. And this belief system becomes a prison, one where your happiness is tied to someone who is no longer present, who no longer sees you the same way or worse, who never did. And instead of waking up to that truth, most men double down. They send more texts, post more stories, stalk her page hoping for signs, analyze every word she says or doesn't say, looking for a hidden meaning when the real meaning is obvious. She's moved on, emotionally, mentally, and maybe even physically, and by refusing to let go, you're not proving your devotion. You're proving your dependence, because every moment you spend focused on her is a moment you're not focused on you, and this is where the illusion of control destroys you, because you think by staying close, emotionally, digitally, energetically, you're maintaining the connection, but all you're really doing is delaying your healing, deepening your wounds, and reinforcing the idea that your life is on pause until she decides you're valuable again. But here's the truth you're avoiding. Letting go isn't giving up, it's waking up. And the only way to take back control of your reality is to fully, brutally, and unconditionally release the version of you that needs her to feel whole. The version of you that waits, that fantasizes, that lives in the past. And this isn't easy. Not because it's hard to forget her, but because it's hard to face the silence that follows, the questions that rise, the emotions you've been drowning with distractions, and most men would rather chase a fantasy than sit in that silence. But it's in that silence that the real transformation begins, because once you stop reaching out, stop watching, stop feeding her ego with your attention, you're left with the one thing that truly matters, yourself, and what you do in that moment defines the rest of your life. You can either numb yourself with dating apps, rebound relationships, empty validation, or you can rebuild alone, without applause, without backup, without the crutch of her potential return. And that rebuilding looks like therapy, fitness, mentorship, mission. It looks like setting goals so clear and purposeful that her memory doesn't disappear. It just becomes irrelevant. And slowly, day by day, you start to see the truth. You never needed her to change. You needed you to change, because the man who clings to someone who left isn't preserving love. He's avoiding responsibility. He's outsourcing happiness. And until you stop doing that, you'll never be free. And this is why letting go becomes the ultimate power move. Not because it makes her come back, not because it impresses anyone, but because it recenters you in your own life. Because control doesn't come from dominating others. It comes from mastering yourself, your urges, your needs, your weaknesses. And no woman, no matter how beautiful, desirable, or once perfect, is worth more than your sanity, your peace, or your future. So if you want control, real control, stop calling it strength when it's really desperation. Stop calling it love when it's really attachment. And stop asking why she changed when you knew deep down you were never the priority. Because letting go is the only way forward. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. Not with games, but with goals. And one day, when she texts you out of nowhere, trying to reinsert herself into your space, you'll realize you've moved so far, climbed so high, built so much, that the version of you she once controlled doesn't even exist anymore. And that's when you'll know letting go wasn't the loss. It was the liberation. Number 8. Scarcity builds value. Scarcity builds value because what is abundant is taken for granted. What is always available is never respected. And the reason most men become disposable in the eyes of women isn't because they're not good enough, but because they've made themselves too available, too predictable, too emotionally accessible. And this is the bitter pill most won't swallow. The more consistently present you are without being consistently respected, the faster she devalues you, not because she's cruel or calculating, but because human nature responds to cost and consequence. And when your presence costs her nothing, when your validation flows freely no matter how she treats you, when your time, your energy, your attention is handed over like air, she doesn't treasure it. She breathes it in without even noticing it's there. And when it's gone, only then might she feel the difference. But even then, only if you truly cut off the supply, because fake scarcity, posting mysterious quotes, pretending to be busy, playing games, won't work, because she can feel when your heart is still fixated on her. She knows when your attention is still orbiting her page. And the only way scarcity creates value is when it's rooted in actual detachment, when it's the result of you living a life so full of purpose, so stacked with priorities, so invested in growth, that you genuinely don't have time for people who undervalue you. And when she senses that, truly senses that you've become rare, not by faking it, but by evolving, it shifts everything, not just how she sees you, but how the world sees you, because men who operate from abundance are rarely respected, but men who create scarcity through discipline, boundaries, and purpose become magnetic, and this applies to every area of life, not just romance. If your energy is available to anyone, you become drained. If your time is given to everyone, it becomes worthless. If your presence is a default, it loses all impact. And most men lose power because they never say no. They don't say no to disrespect, no to manipulation, no to being an emotional safety net for a woman who won't commit. And until you start saying no, until you start cutting off access to people who treat you like a convenience, you will never experience what it's like to be truly valued. And this isn't about punishment. It's about positioning, because you don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. And if you're operating from desperation, from fear of being alone, from scarcity mindset, then everything you attract will mirror that. Inconsistent women, disrespectful friends, toxic cycles. But if you raise your standards, remove yourself from spaces where you're not celebrated, invest in your goals, stay silent where you used to seek closure, stay focused where you used to chase, it becomes obvious that your value never disappeared. It was just diluted by your availability. And when that dilution ends, when you reclaim your time and energy, when you make yourself scarce not as a strategy, but as a reflection of your growth, people start to notice not just her, but everyone, because true scarcity isn't loud. It's undeniable. It speaks through absence, through presence that must be earned, through the tension of not knowing if you'll show up. And this doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you intentional. And if she doesn't value that, if she plays games, stays silent, expects you to wait, let her go. Because the more you value yourself, the more invisible you become to those who don't. And that's the power of scarcity. It doesn't attract everyone. It filters out those who were never meant to stay. If you've felt every word in your gut, if you're done being the man who waits, explains, hopes, then it's time to rise. The Stoic relationship blueprint isn't a book. It's a weapon against manipulation, against your own emotional chaos, against the years you've wasted being the nice guy who got nothing but silence in return. This is the blueprint to becoming the man who never begs, never chases, and never settles for less. If you're ready to reclaim your power, to never again hand your peace to someone who didn't deserve it, comment, "I master the silence" right now, like this video, and subscribe to help this message reach every man still stuck in emotional slavery. The ebook is linked in the comments. Get it today and never be confused again.